vividly remember 2018. I'm sitting at the Lone Star Clinic in College Station, Texas. It's one of the best clinics in America. And I'll never forget the Oklahoma State, I think his name was Hammerschmidt, was talking about, you guys got to see this three high stuff that Iowa State's doing. And they were just actually, I think they were just hiring Jim Knowles to come to Oklahoma State. And they were redoing the defense. And one of the things about it was this three high defense. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I start watching Iowa State. Lo and behold, we have the three high revolution at the college level. I think we're kind of waning back. We talked about that with Tyler Manis and the college trends. But we are about to go through a three high revolution in the NFL, but it's not the way that you think, Felix. That's what we're talking about today, defensive trends in the NFL. But first, let's get to our news and headlines. We had the end of minicamp, lots of minicamp stats, lots of great passes.
This guy didn't throw an interception. All right, whatever. In
I would be more worried if I heard a quarterback didn't throw an interception during minicamp than I would be like, hey, he had a 5 interception day. People don't understand that the reps at the NFL level are so precious that you are willing to make mistakes in practice so that you can learn from them and you don't make them on Sundays. Please quit looking at OTA and minicamp stats and let's move on.
I think it's just people like us scrounging for things. Like, it's the middle of June. We want to see football. Like, the UFL's even over. Like, we're trying to get some type of football, and this is the closest thing we can. It's like, all right, Jalen Hurts threw 8 interceptions. He's terrible, or he's the best. I don't know. Who knows?
He's cooked.
But things are getting interesting with mini camps, OTAs. We'll get things rolling here as things go along. But Trey Hendrickson and the Cincinnati Bengals have resumed talks. It's been kind of back and forth all summer, or all offseason so far with Trey Hendrickson. Do you think they get a deal done? What do you see happening with Trey Hendrickson? Obviously a pivotal part of their defense over the last couple of years, but even more so now that they don't have as many resources as they did before.
Yeah, and I think a part of this too is also with the Shemar Stewart. I mean, they do not have both of their starting, penciled in starters at defensive end. They're going to have to get it taken care of. I think it's very interesting. They're going to have to do some funny money stuff because they did just pay those receivers, but this is notorious. This is the reason why even when, they go to the Super Bowl, but even then it's like you have this retraction of we don't pay our players. I think if Joe Burrow doesn't stand on the table and basically threaten to leave, they're probably not signing T. Higgins. And so it's like you have to sit here and look at this as an extension of that. I know Burrow came out and said we've got to get him, but if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm really, really worried because we've already had a retraction on defense in the last couple of years. If we lose both of our defensive ends that are supposed to be our starters, especially one that's an all-pro, that was like sack leader of the NFL last year, major issues. But again, it's par for the course for the Bengals. This is something that we see all the time with this organization.
Right. It is just kind of weird. They've just said, whatever, we're not spending money on defense. Just no. And Trey Hendrickson, it just makes sense. He led the league in sacks. Pay him. It's just like one of those things. It's just like
pay him.
A plus B equals C.
Right.
And they're not doing it. So, and it's kind of like the Cowboys where it's like, pay Micah Parsons already. You're only going to have to pay him more later. A plus B equals C. They're not doing it.
Jerry Jones is like the guy that's like, instead, like, I don't shop sales. I only go when it's the most expensive. Like, I just want to be able to tell everybody that I have the most expensive defensive end in the NFL instead of like, hey, look at the deal that we got because I did this early and I got it done right when we possibly could. Instead of that, we're sitting here saying, oh, look, I'm paying these high price payers. Look what you want. It's just another. And two, again, it goes back to bad news bad news doesn't matter. It's good news if it means that it's on and we're talking about, they're talking about Dak's legacy every day on ESPN. Like, come on, it's the Cowboys. It's all for show. And here we are. Here we are again.
It's Dallas again. If you hear that thunder rolling in, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder just took a 3-2 lead, and I live 2 hours away, so apparently people are celebrating and having a good time. But moving on here, Saquon Barkley, he's had a couple of interviews this offseason. There was one that he said like the Eagles were like a top 5 team in all of NFL history, which that's a separate conversation. This one, though, is kind of interesting on an individual standpoint because Saquon says that he's entering his prime. It's year 8. He's a running back. This seems like to be the time where running backs seem to wind down their careers. But last year, we saw Derrick Henry, a 30-plus-year-old running back, have a great year. Josh Jacobs went to Green Bay, had a great year. J.K. Dobbins, I know he moved on from L.A., but he had another really good year. I know some injuries were mixed in. Saquon, moving on to a new team after years in New York. Is this kind of the end of the era where we see like running backs, 10 years and that's the cap, and after 8, it's like, all right, we're done, and 10 years is the end? But is this kind of, you see running backs lasting longer moving forward?
Yeah, his usage last year is unsustainable. Now, I do believe because of analytics, because of kind of people understanding that we have to rest these guys, we don't want to just use them as battering rams and then throw them out of the NFL when their usage is up. But you had over 400, I think it was like 400 carries last year. There is a magic number. I think it's like 328 that they've done studies on. In fact, I think it's Schwartz from FTN has done this study where if you get to 328, once that happens, you actually go down. Now, Derrick Henry's an interesting use case because he actually kind of excelled last year, but he didn't have to carry the load. So if Saquon is going to have another stellar year, probably don't want to have 2,000 yards rushing. But here's the thing. When you catch lightning like that, you ride it. They won a Super Bowl. I don't think anybody regrets it. But I don't look for another 2,000-yard season again. They need to find a backup running back that can come and just whittle away at some carries. Keep him at 300 carries a year if you have to. And because also, too, they don't want to run Hurts. You don't want to run the quarterback on these designed runs at volume in the NFL. And I'm not even talking about the tush push or quarterback sneaks. I'm talking about designed quarterback runs. It's not something you want to do with 20 times a game, but it is going to be part of the game plan. They need to find a running back, though, behind Saquon that they feel really, really comfortable. And that's where we kind of are in the NFL. You have to have 2 running backs. I mean, look at the Panthers are a good example of like they went out and got Rico Dowdle, who had 1,000 yards rushing, and they got Chuba Hubbard, who we all
and they just extended him,
another 1,000 yard. Okay, well, we've got these 2 guys. They even have the blue kid from Texas if he'll ever get healthy. So you figure they may have one of the better backfields in the NFL, and they're going to keep them fresh. I think what you're seeing now is the same way that people treat the defensive end in the edge room is let's just have a 2 deep to where we can just rotate, guys stay fresh. We have a primary guy, but we got to keep him fresh, and let's not rush him for 400 carries again.
Saquon Barkley had 345 carries last year. Derrick Henry had 325.
And I think if you add the playoffs, I think
that was 16 regular season games for Saquon, and plus that doesn't include the playoffs.
That's what I was talking about. Like if you add that, but if you get to, he got close to that magical number of, I think it's like 328. You get to that number that you're going to start trailing off pretty quick.
But Derrick Henry he's had like 3 or 4 300+ carry seasons. He had 378 when he hit 2,000 the first time. He had 349 second to last season in Tennessee. So he's kind of used to doing that. But so it's like even stranger in Derrick Henry's case that he's still going at this rate, 320+ carries. And it probably won't be that next year. And then obviously the load is going to be a little lower just because he's playing with Lamar Jackson. But at the same time, he's been at this high rate for a decade at this point.
Yes. And I think too, he's talked about it too. Like he spends almost something like $250,000 on his health. Something like that, which I think is different than other generations. I think a lot of guys are just playing ball. You go and work out in the off season, you stay healthy, but now these guys are like in hyperbaric chambers. They're doing they have their own physio trainers with on their payroll. They have, I think he talked about having a chef. So all of his meals are cooked and the guy travels with them. So, I mean, it's that's a completely different, I think the money's different, but I also think it's a completely different mindset now for athletes in the way that they take care of their body than it is, even just 10 years ago.
For sure. Now let's get to our big topic of the day. You're probably itching to get here. You're just ready to talk.
I'm going to nerd out. So let's
you're ready to go. First and foremost, let's talk some coverage disguises up in usage this past year. And I want to ask primarily, you think this is because we're seeing younger quarterbacks and you're not seeing as much film on them, so you want to like confuse them as much as possible? Why are defensive coordinators choosing to disguise their coverages against some of these? I mean, we see a lot of young quarterbacks coming into the league in these last couple of years. Is that why, or is there another reason as to why their defensive coordinators are choosing to do certain things?
I think that's part of the reason. And part of the reason is we have these young quarterbacks and we're trying to disguise it. We're trying to muddy the waters, especially now that we have under center play action usage, which is so high in the NFL anyway. I'm going to turn my back on the secondary. I'm going to ball fake. When I turn back around, that secondary is going to look completely different. I've got to now get my eyes to my clues, my leverage player, wherever coaches told me to get to. And now I'm going to have to find. So that second of hesitation allows that pass rush to get there. But I also think it has a lot to do with the fact that this is a passing league. This is a quarterback driven league. You have to pass the ball to score. Now, we had the run revolution last year, but again, I think that's more or less the pendulum swinging back on personnel usage. Offenses committing back to the run, understanding that you run to win, you pass to score. For me, what it really does is you are essentially keeping those safeties high so that they have time to really dissect whether it is a run or it is a pass. So I think it's twofold, where we have the disguise in there for the quarterback, especially under center play action, but also we're better leveraged to defend the pass. You know, deep crossing routes, we're attacking the sticks. All of those things are there. That's why, you know, we talked about the past couple of weeks with our offensive guys. The quick game is coming back, not RPOs, but quick game. Why? Well, everybody's kind of playing from depth. Okay, that you have a lot of space underneath. You know, there's very few teams in the NFL that are willing to press 50% plus. Go look at the Jaguars defense last year. Tell me how that worked out. Even though supposedly they have a really good pass rush, that kind of gives you an idea that a pass rush is always important in pass coverage, but if your corners can't cover, it really doesn't matter, especially if your safeties can't cover. So to me, I think that is where we're really seeing it. Is it's allowing our safeties to play from depth, identify the pass quicker. We also are not working back. We're working forward, which is a much, much easier proposition. And at the end of the day, this is the final answer. Nobody in the NFL is scared of a 4-yard run.
Yeah.
Because now you're in a passing situation. Live to play another day, force the offense to go on a 12, 15 play drive. You're going to make a mistake.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's only a couple of guys that can execute multiple 10, 15 play drives every game, and multiple offenses and coaches and whatever the case may be. And so you might as well force everybody to do something like that 4 yards at a time. And so, and then you're, like you say, somebody's going to make a mistake, and it may not even be an interception or a fumble or a turnover or a sack even. It's just somebody had the wrong assignment, or they just forgot the play, or whatever the case may be. Exactly. And then you have a tackle for loss, and all of a sudden something big happens.
Yeah. And I think, too, the other part of this is we're seeing more and more, like, everybody knows the rules for your base coverage. So if you're just going to go out there and run country 3, which means just a basic cover 3 where everybody's spot drop into a spot, even if you run match coverages. So like, hey, we run Saban's Rip Liz. Okay, well, everybody kind of understands the beaters for that. What we're seeing now is like these Frankenstein coverages that you get from having a split field safety look. So like, for instance, a great example of this is like the Bills. Okay, the Bills will run half 2-man on one side, half zone 2 zone on the other side. They're still running cover 2. They do this to the Dolphins, but you get this. Then you have all these like non-traditional Tampas, which imagine Tampa as 11 X's on the board. They're all on the spot. You just have to make sure the guy can physically get to that spot from that. So you can do anything. So, hey, we run a lot of 3 buzz, meaning that strong safety is going to insert on top of the strong hook. Okay. That's great. We can invert that side, make it look like 3 buzz, but we're still running Tampa. And so I think that's where a lot of it comes to, is we're going to simulate looks that these base down looks that you're used to, but then we're going to be able to Frankenstein it, because we can run a buzz concept to one side, but then we can run cover 2 to the other side. We're still running Tampa at the end of the day. we see this with the quarter half Fangio world, where we can move cover 2 to the nickel. We can move cover 2 away from it. We can run quarters. And look, split field coaches forever have been like, yeah, this is nothing new to me. It's just finally catching up to the NFL. And I think that and the non-traditional Tampas have really kind of made it really difficult for offenses to kind of, figure out what's going on, especially when you have that young quarterback.
Absolutely, and I want to get to the how fronts are changing things a little bit, because I from the offensive line perspective, I used to hate seeing a wide 9, because like why are you all the way out there? Like, what? Come in a little bit closer, because we're supposed to be playing a little bit tighter. And like some of these defensive lines are changing. I can't even think of his name. Chris Kakurik, I think, he's the D-line coach out in San Francisco now, but he's been everywhere, it seems like. He was with Detroit for a while, and it seems like he's been a big pivotal point in changing a lot of this. And maybe you can have a little bit of insight into this. We're seeing more 4 down. But do you think that we're seeing that change because Belichick had a lot of that 3-4 look and things were shifting a lot? But do we see more 4 down just because we like seeing that wide 9, because you have your Nick Bosa's and your Myles Garrett's, your different guys that can fit into those roles?
Yeah, I think the wide 9 stops wide zone. That's why Shanahan went out and got him to come and be his defensive line coach and teach Saleh, hey, and this is back in 2018, hey, teach him the wide 9. It's the hardest defense for us to play. I think you saw something really unique last year with the Chargers, where they essentially had Tier Tart and Puna Ford, which are 2 noses. Those are not 3 techniques, but they said, look, we're going to put you on top of a guard, and you're just going to basically control the guard, force a double team one way or the other. Now, the what you're hearing, though, is because we're dropping from too high, one of the things that was really popular a couple of years ago was the penny front, which is your 5-1 front. But you're constantly having to drop that safety in. If the offensive line can win one-on-ones, that running back's able to seam. You're going to get a lot of 3-by-1. They're going to push that solo backer all the way out because he has to relate to the number 3 guy because he is the bite. So now you're really having to hammer that down. The other thing that I think off of this is like you said, that wide 9 has become really, really popular, because if I'm going to drop from too high, even if I'm going to play in a cover 3, we can do things from that wide 9 where we can play these what are called gap and a half, meaning I'm going to pop the guard back. I'm going to get my face in one gap. If the running back crosses me, I'm now able to get into the other gap. It slows everything down for linebackers. Again, if you're noticing anything, I'm slowing down the linebackers. I'm slowing down the safeties. Why? Because we want to play coverage as long as we possibly can. So that's why I think the other thing too is when you get in a 5-1 structure, you're in a bear front, meaning that you have 2 4-eyes or 3 techniques. You have 2 wide 9s. It is great versus wide zone. The problem that you find in it is that you're constantly rushing 5. So now you are in a fire zone coverage, or what we call basically like a palms pressure, where you're running 2 read to both sides. Those can be really, really tough on offenses because you're losing a guy in coverage constantly. And even if you drop a guy, like you do a seesaw action where we engage a Sam or we engage a Jack and we push the front, those are great too, but you're still losing an edge to one side. If I go wide 9, my edges can eat now. I just got to figure out the inside part. And I think more people are willing to give up a 4-yard run than that. So I think that's where, and then also too, with just the 3 high revolution that we're getting ready to see, which is essentially these 3 high structures where we have 3 safeties on field. This isn't just big nickel. It also lends for some of these movement pieces as well.
Right. And we talk a lot about Kansas City on both sides of the ball because Andy Reid's ahead of schedule and they've been seeing different things. But also Steve Spagnuolo, you're a big fan, even though you're wearing your stupid Broncos hat today. But like Steve Spagnuolo has been playing with 3 safeties for like 2 or 3 years longer than just about everybody else, because it seems, I don't know if he's had to or whatever the case may have been, and you can tell me now, but like, what is it that Steve Spagnuolo is just like, yeah, let's go ahead and get Dan Sorensen out there when he was still a Kansas City Chief, and then it morphed into, all right, let's just get every halfway decent defensive back, and then we're going to turn them into a starter in the NFL in their first 2 years, and they're going to be these 5th round pick out of Fayetteville State or whatever. So like, what is this? These guys are fitting into the system so perfectly. What is it with Spags? And I know what I sound like with this, but he is one of these great defensive minds.
Well, I think it goes back to these Frankenstein coverages, these coverage disguises. Spagnuolo has always kind of been known for coverage disguise. He's kind of tapered down on it the past couple of years, but I think the one thing that he's always done is a lot of like pre-snap movement in the secondary. The easy button on that is like, well, let's just put safeties in there because safeties have to know whether I'm a down safety in cover 3 or I'm back in quarters or cover 2 or whether it's Tampa, even in cover 3, close the post. Like we have to have all those skills to play defense and Kansas City. You have to be a hybrid safety. And so I think for him, it's like, well, if I get 4 of these guys, because there were times in their dime package, they were playing big dime. They had 4 safeties on the field. Well, if I got 4, I created a box in the middle of the field. I can move those guys anywhere I want. And I think that's where you're really seeing it. And again, we're getting to more, if teams want to go 12 personnel, okay, because think who the Chiefs have to go up against in good on good all through the offseason and all through practice. They're going against their own offense where you have Noah Gray and you have Travis Kelce. Well, Noah Gray is really a Y. You got Travis Kelce, who's an F. Even though they go 12 personnel, we can play it really in a sub package. It's easier to play that sub package knowing that they can still run the ball if we have a safety there. This is the same thing that we see with the Chargers. This is what Seattle was trying to create last year with Rayshon Jenkins, even though injuries kind of have hurt them. But they did draft the man, I'm going to botch his name, the kid from South Carolina that's a freak. They drafted him to be that guy. I mean, I think during camp I heard he's literally just playing nickel. Because he already has a deep safety stuff. If he can play nickel, you go and look at the Panthers with Trayvon Moehrig. They're trying to get more safeties to be able to play that. Go look at what the Cardinals are doing with their 3 high stuff. Yeah, their nickel you could maybe say is a corner, but he's really playing a hash safety half the time, and Buddha's basically getting down there as a linebacker. So you look at this, and that's why, I mean, Spags has kind of been ahead of the trend on this the 3 safety stuff. He's been ahead of the trend on the palms pressures, which everybody are trying to take from him. So I think to me, when you look at it, he's an elite teacher, but using things and being ahead of the curve on a lot of this is really why Kansas City's defense has been able to punch above its weight.
Yeah. That's what's as great as the offense and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have been. The reason, and I have the logo over my shoulder. The reason they've been Kansas City over the last half decade and like been able to continue is because Spags has been ahead of schedule. They've been able to figure everything out a lot of the time. So we'll talk more about like how Trent McDuffie's role as the slot corner plays into that here in just a second, because he's more of a hybrid player. We've been mentioning the hybrids and how hybrids fit into everything. But once I go back to the fronts and everything, and you were talking about how we're slowing down the linebacker, slowing down safeties with guards trying to climb up to them. Is that why we're seeing bigger nose guards? So just get in their way so they can't climb up to the second level that you're forced to double team with. The center has to come over, or the backside guard, or whatever the case may be. Is that why we're seeing bigger nose guards? Because we've seen more, and I know he hasn't been in the league in however long, but Snacks Harrison types, big guys just having longer careers, it seems like. Vince Wilfork, if even.
Gilbert Brown, Vince Wilfork. Yeah. Now, those guys are freaks. Like, those kind of aliens. But in terms of, like, we need a bigger body inside, that's because we're trying to anchor. We're trying to create an anchor. I need a double team. I'm trying to change the math. If I can put 4 defensive linemen down and I force you into a double team, I'm going to be able to get someone free or someone let the edges win against the tackles. I'm going to be able to do something like that. So I'm trying to change the math by these bigger bodies. That's why I think you saw kind of the guys that really struggle are teams that are trying to run kind of that old school wide 9 where everybody just kind of jets the front, meaning that they're just kind of attacking their gap, then they're reacting later. I think it's more react and then attack, more I'm going to work to the face of the guard. I'm going to try and invite the center. If the center doesn't come, I'm going to get my gap and a half. If the center comes, I'm going to take on the double team. I mean, if you want clinic double team footage, go watch the Chargers. I mean, both of them were taking on double teams. I think it wears off in the end, but I do think like that's one of the structures. I think too, like a great example of front usage is the Rams with their dime. They ran more dime last year than anybody else, and they called it their Cheetah pack. And the reason why they were able to do that was because they had these 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. So we're getting our one-on-ones. We're all quick. We're all attacking. And you kind of shield yourself from some of that stuff from your defensive backs. Now, they're their DBs, especially at corner, need to be upgraded. But I do think like that's one of the things that people are trying to play more dime, and they're trying to do it with safeties. So how are you going to kind of eliminate gap usage for these guys? Because you don't want them in a primary gap all the time. Well, you're doing that with big guys inside. Steelers are another good example of having two big guys inside, having two edge rushers outside, being able to demand double teams. You know, they got Benton and then Hayward. And so they're able to do some things inside and be able to live in nickel. Because if you're going to live in nickel, you're going to be able to do that. And then you also have to have a safety. Like Deshaun Elliott is a great example of a safety that does not mind mixing it up. You know, Fitzpatrick can move around. You know, they've got guys. So that's what I think teams are looking for now is hybrid safeties, but also can you play near the box? Like Kyle Hamilton, go block him on a perimeter screen. Go block him in the, you know, he'll take on a tackle. He'll take on a guard. He's not scared of that. He'll take on a tight end. So I think that's kind of where we are and why they want more safety type bodies down, and why the 3 high structure and really the big nickel is back from a decade ago.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that, like, if you're really good, like the Rams are really good in their D line and front seven, and then Kansas City is really good on their back end. It allows for more creativity wherever you're really good. Like if you have Kansas City has Chris Jones as their big playmaker, so effectively your D-line is controlled by that. So you can do whatever you want on the back end. For the Rams, their D-line, they've drafted a bunch of different guys, Fisk and Verse, over the last couple of years. So let's do some different things on the back end. Now they still need a playmaker on the back end with their 6 DB package. There's talk of them trying to get Jalen Ramsey back potentially. So that's why, like, defensive coordinators get paid too. So it's not like these guys are just drawing up plays, and I know you know this, but it's this not just like guys are drawing up plays. No, we get to do whatever we want to because we have these cool things we can do, and because we have these really interesting athletes that we have to work with. And I think that defense has, outside of like wide receiver and tight end, some really interesting players because you have safeties that aren't afraid of 300-pound men sprinting at them, about to take them out, like a Derwin James, like just dudes who are – maybe they're outside of their minds and they're football players. Of course they are. But it's just like these hybrid football players that are able to do different things and be available for all these different types of defenses.
Yeah, and that leads us to the next trend, which is hybrid players. You have to now add value as a defensive guy. This is something that we saw evolution-wise with running backs. Right? Everybody wants a Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. You have to be able to catch the ball. You know, some of these running backs like Derrick Henry, he's so good at running the ball. It doesn't matter that he really struggles.
Pure runner.
Does not matter. There's very few of those guys anymore. Most of these guys somewhere on the spectrum are going to be a pass catching running back, whether it's, you know, the guys with the Buccaneers like Bucky Irving, who's a behind the line guy, or a guy like a Christian McCaffrey that can run the full route tree. I think with safeties now, our box safeties are having a little bit of a rebirth because you can repackage yourself as a nickel defender. And because nickel is now the base way that we're playing defense, now more coaches are comfortable saying, okay, he may be a little stiff in the hips. Okay, maybe he can't defend, you know, Justin Jefferson on a post route in cover 2, but we can live with him near the box because he can guard the perimeter. He's hard to block. I mean, again, I go back, Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James, go put a typical slot receiver on him, go try and have him block. No, you're going to try and move tight end out there. Okay, move tight end. You now just gave up what you're trying to do on some of these perimeter screens. You know, it's the same argument that we always get with like AJ Brown versus CeeDee Lamb. They're always going to argue. See, AJ Brown at some point is going to tweet about how CeeDee Lamb's really just a slot receiver and that he actually Brown plays everything. You know, so it's like you have to move around now, right? Like Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb are the 3 best receivers in the NFL. That's because they play every receiver position. You know, Jamar Chase is up there too. He can be a power slot. You can move him outside. He can win outside. So I think to me, there's three hybrid players. We've always had hybrid defensive linemen, but in terms of like moving on back, you have to have a down safety. That's Derwin James, Josh Metellus, who, by the way, created his own position with the Vikings. Like,
I wanted to talk about him, and just because there was this love affair with Brian Flores. Everybody thought he was going to get a head coaching job, and he still might. Like, things still could go well because it's the Vikings. But like, what was Flores doing with Metellus? And like, it's just creativity. Again, it goes back to that point that I was making earlier. It's just these guys are getting paid too to be creative, and we saw it with Brian Flores. What were some of the things that Flores was doing with Metellus?
Well, we go back to last week with Tyler talking about the creativity from having a simple defense like Jim Knowles. Well, Flores and the Vikings defense was not complex. They just were loading the front. They had an excellent blitzer in Metellus. They would use him to either blitz or to drop. He's a great vision player underneath. He's essentially, Metellus would have been able to play 10 years ago because he would have been a down safety, he would have been a box safety.
Exactly, like a Cam Chancellor type.
Yes.
Like I mean, obviously he was a freak athlete, but we're seeing some of these athletes that would have been that played 10 years ago and guys that playing now that could have played 10 years ago, but there's that weird space in between where we're playing 10 personnel and nobody,
right,
just weird stuff.
We just want a third corner out there to play. Yeah,
exactly.
But Metellus was a great blitzer. He could draw from depth. If in a pinch, if he needed to play back, he could. The other guys. So then I get to the, you have Derwin James, you have Metellus, who is kind of unique within this group, but then you also have Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton, who, because of roster attrition and roster structure, had to play more deep. But what Brian Branch, what is hilarious, his rookie year, I mean, Aaron Glenn was like, because when they were like, Aaron Glenn was like, yeah, he's going to move back to back safety, to deep safety. And everybody was like, but he's like an all-pro nickel. Why would you take him out as a rookie? He basically like followed McDuffie, right? Yeah, McDuffie was a rookie all-pro. Yeah, Brian Branch was a rookie all-pro. And everybody's like, why? And it's like, because he doesn't come off the field. And the problem with a lot of NFL defensive coordinators, and I think this is changing, is like you have like silos, like this is our base, these 11 play. Then we have our nickel package, these 11 play. Well, if you're the nickel in nickel, you don't play as a starter outside. And that to me is like ridiculous. Why would you not play your 11? So you're seeing more schematic fluidity where the plays we run in base can transfer to the plays we run at nickel, to big nickel, depending on, now we can really just move guys around and get the matchup that we want. And that's what Branch and Hamilton do for you. Yeah. They can slide down to nickel and be all pros, or they can play safety and be just as good on the back end. And that to me is where defenses are changing from. Now safeties can move down, and why we're seeing a run on third safeties.
Well, and I view it from the offensive line perspective. If you're playing left guard, you ought to know what the right guard's doing, and you have to know what the guy next to you is doing, so you know what the left tackle's doing. If you have to play there, you go there. Then you ought to know what the right tackle's doing. Now center's has to know what everybody's doing a little bit, and so like it kind of like the quarterback does. And so it's kind of like, of course, just this guy can play there, and obviously there's more fluidity in a secondary than there is in an offensive line. So there are so many different things that you can do. And I think that we've seen it's a lot with just bigger players. Like we're seeing bigger linebackers, 240, 250-pound linebackers, bigger defensive ends, and like Leo Chenal with the Chiefs. We've seen Frankie Louvu, he's probably more a different mindset type of player than those guys. So like, what are we seeing? And I know Micah Parsons, he does a lot of different things. The Cowboys do a lot of different things with him. And so what are we seeing, particularly with the linebackers, and why they're getting, not necessarily, I guess bigger is the wrong word, but they're hybrids in the same way. They're basically playing safety at the same time, but they're also run stoppers, like safeties are.
Well, and I think it goes back to schematic fluidity. We're running more 4 down, which gives us a base structure. Go to any offensive coordinator from junior high to the NFL and say, run your favorite run concept against your favorite front. It's going to be an over front 4 down because they know the angles. It's easy. They can identify everything. So if we're going to already set up, we're trying to get that pass rush, but how can we get into some of these odd structures, meaning that we're now closing the B gaps? Well, you do that with a hybrid linebacker. Like Frankie Louvu was an all-pro off-ball linebacker. Well, half the time he's an edge, right? Dan Quinn's literally walking him down, getting into a bear front. They're getting into a penny look. I think, to me, true penny is kind of waning in popularity, and now we're more or less like, hey, what if we just walk the wheel down, get into a reduction, meaning we're just going to move the guys half a gap. Now we're in an odd spacing look. We can still run everything that we got, but now it's basically like blitzing them off the edge. I think too, Caden Ellis is another good example of a guy that's able to do that from from kind of that hybrid structure. Zach Bond this year was used a ton as a guy to kind of walk down. Go watch week 1 against the Packers, and you could just see Fangio was like, I got another Andrew Van Ginkel, but can actually play off the ball. And so those hybrid guys, that's the next trend of like, my off ball. We saw this year in Jalen Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Teams needed to have a plan for him, because if you were just going to play him only at inside linebacker, going to kind of struggle. If you were going to move him to edge, he's probably too light in the shorts to really be a guy that full-time edge in the NFL.
Right.
But if you can use him in a hybrid structure, you have a plan for him. Hey, we're going to do this. You're going to be in this package. We're going to move you around. We're going to really use you in that ability. Then you get that. So to me, I think what the best example of this, and you mentioned it, and again, we go back to the Chiefs with Spagnuolo, is Leo Chanel can line up in a 3 technique.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the old flex 3
like
that Landry created here in Dallas, and move all the way out to edge. And they use him, and even Tranquil. There's at least 2 or 3 snaps a year where Tranquil is a deep safety pedaling in the deep half and a cover.
And now he's wearing, because linebackers can wear whatever number they want to. He's wearing 23. So I'm like, wait, who the hell is?
Right. You're like, who's the white safety that the Chiefs? Oh wait, no, that's Tranquil. Right.
But we talked a little bit, and we're on the Chiefs here, and I think that Trent McDuffie is one of the better examples of this as a slot corner. What kind of how is a player like that able to allow like a 4 safety look or a 3 safety look, because they've got that slot controlled, or whatever the case may be? We're seeing a lot of guys like Jalen Ramsey type, who you can just say, go on the field and figure something out, and he'll do something. So, and it's just, we're seeing more of that with corners as opposed to safeties now. So why are we seeing that change now?
Well, if I want to go base, I don't want to have to get into trouble by taking a nickel off. If I can slide, if my nickel corner is my best corner, I'm going to slide him back outside. I mean, we see this in Kenny Moore with the Colts. He was their starting nickel. They go base 4-3 under Bradley. He's bumping outside. They're not taking him off the field. Keyshawn Nixon with the Packers last year played almost solely outside. Javon Bullard's probably going to play nickel now. So again, they're going to a 3 safety look with Javon Bullard. They're going to kick him outside. He played good. They got Nate Hobbs, who played nickel for the Raiders. Is probably going to play outside for the Packers, has the ability to move inside so they can mix and match how they want. Byron Murphy for the Vikings got signed. So when Metellus came off the field, or they needed they were 11 personnel, say playing the Bengals, they want to put a corner in there, they go with Byron Murphy. Well, when Byron Murphy's not playing nickel, where's he playing? Outside. Jalen Ramsey's another example. You hit on it. He can move anywhere. He can play the star. He can play outside. Trent McDuffie. The reason why they went outside was because they didn't have any. So who did they go this offseason go and get? Fulton. Why did they go get Fulton? So they can kick him back in. It just get Shamari Connors is a good nickel. He's not an all-pro nickel. But Trent McDuffie is also one of those, kind of like in the same mold of Kyler Gordon at the Bears, is that, speaking of another Washington dog, is that they can play near the box and can hold up near the box. Same with Taron Johnson. Now, some of these guys, like a Taron Johnson or a Kyler Gordon, are not going to be moved outside. They're really good at the nickel. You don't want them outside. But another one that we're hearing from camp is that Cooper DeJean, because Darius Slay is gone, might be playing full-time outside in base, which would not shock me. He was a great outside corner. We all kind of had an idea that he would be a really good nickel. So then finally, the last guy, because this is where we're seeing this kind of explosion of guys like, no, why would we take him off, is Devin Witherspoon. We don't have a third corner in Seattle. So what do? We make sure Devin Witherspoon stays on the field. Now you're talking about some aliens playing some corner. Devin Witherspoon,
arms,
and Reek Woolen, 6'3 plus, 6'4 plus.
You got power forwards out there, dude.
How do you win outside? You don't. So, I mean, I think that's why McDonald's really trying to get a third safety in there, is because if I can keep those guys outside, it eliminates a lot of problems that I have. And so I think that's why we're seeing this, that as kind of the new, hey, you've got to add value, and we're going to play our best 11. If the offense, like Sean McVay's going to play all 11 and they're going to play their best 11, we're going to do the same thing too. There's no reason to take lesser guys or better guys off for a lesser guy.
Right, and you mentioned the Trip McDuffie from Washington, Kyler Gordon from Washington. Like, no wonder Jimmy Lake got a NFL DC job. Like, when he got the job with the Falcons, I was like, wait, what? And then it was like, oh yeah, they've got dudes, and he's like kind of been on this trend, and that came from college, it seems like, or at least these players are coming from college. And so we talked a little bit about Brian Flores, and like the name of his game, at least for the casual, was pressure, and then it seemed like he was doing it with blitzers and from disguises and dropping guys that were on the line and doing just crazy things. Van Ginkel was in there. And so what are we seeing on blitzing on early downs that has been changing effectively the atmosphere of most games, as opposed to just like, oh, they got us for a play or a quarter or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, this is one, I think this is a direct example of analytics changing the way that people play the game. It's also a little bit of the collegeification, I'm going to make that word up, of the NFL. The college level, there's a lot of blitzing on early downs. And the reason why is because a lot of these guys, the talent differential is wide. We're going to force the issue.
Mm-hmm.
If we're better, if we're Georgia and we got 8 dudes that are going to go to the NFL in our defensive line, we're going to play sit and get. I'm just going to line up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to beat you. If we get into the playoffs, we'll add a little bit of flair to it just to try and force the issue at some point. But, you know, a lot of these colleges, they're like, we have to force the issue. I mean, Aranda calls these simulated pressures, and I think Aranda and Ron Roberts are kind of the godfathers of these simulated pressures that kind of everybody's running now. And that is these are coordinated cutoffs for the run game on early downs that kind of moonlight as pass protection, attacking blitzes if you're going to play action. So to me, I think the key metric here is if I win early, I win late. This might sound counterintuitive to fans because we hear so much about third down percentage, winning on third down, get off the field, yada, 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 all the coach speak. But the true key to winning third is actually winning first down. If I can keep that offense to 3 yards or less on an early down, I now take control of that. You have to think of this as control. The offense owns first down because it's a 50-50 down. Okay. There's no tendency. If I can get you in a 2nd to 7+, more than likely, you're probably going to pass the ball in the NFL. Now that tendency goes down as we go, but I'm now in control. This is a passing down. I now can use a sub package. I now can maybe do something a little bit different. But if I pressure you on first down, if you go and you look at this, forces the issue against play action pass on early down. So now you have to contend with an extra blitzer. We can probably get away with less people in coverage because you're probably going to do some sort of play action, max protect, or you're going to keep the running back, one of the tight ends in. But these simulated pressures as well are starting to have an uptick. And all a simulated pressure is that we are simulating that we're bringing 5 or more. Now you can present that like the Vikings, just pack everybody in a gap
and then drop them. Yeah.
And then drop, and we only rush 4, but we're still blitzing somebody. Or you can do it from an off-ball position where we have a 4 down and we're blitzing a linebacker, but we're dropping a defensive end. Or, you know, there's a bunch of ways to do that. But if you go and you really look at the teams like the Vikings, the Buccaneers, and the Broncos early down. Now, the Buccaneers are probably not the greatest illustration of this because their linebacker play last year was so atrocious. But the 2 best defenses, arguably, other than the Eagles, was the Vikings and the Broncos. And how are they doing that? They were doing it with 5-man fronts, basically forcing man blocking, and then they were sending an extra guy. They were overloading one side or through the middle, and it really changed the math. I also think, too, more teams are playing split field coverage. Quarters is kind of getting eaten away from the targeted coverages. I call them targeted coverage, meaning that we can move the cover 2 side. It's basically old school quarter, half, or half, quarter. We can just move it to the passing strength or away from the passing strength, talking about the cover 2 side. So I think you're getting a little bit more creative that way in split field. But if you really look at it, Palms pressures, which is essentially quarters pressures, we're going to send 5 but play quarters behind it and have all the layering tools that we have in quarters. I think that's another reason why people feel more comfortable attacking the run or attacking the line of scrimmage early, knowing that we can still cap verticals and we can do some things on the back end through that. And I think that that trend, I think, will only increase going into next season.
Absolutely. And I think that is very interesting, just especially, I mean, just seeing some of the highlights that some of Brian Flores' calls is just like, all right, they showed 8 on the line, and then of course they're not going to blitz 8. That's just not going to happen. But then half of them drop out, or 2 of them, or whatever the case may be. And we'll one of our final topics, we'll talk the wave concept. This kind of went viral on social media over the weekend. At least I saw it a couple of times. Viral is completely different for guys like us, because it's just like,
viral to us is not viral.
What's going on in
viral in the football community?
So I'm going to be honest. I don't exactly understand it, because I play real football. I get my hands broken and everything. So what exactly? How are defenses coming up against this wave concept? Because I believe Kevin O'Connell was the one who kind of mastered it. So how are defenses kind of playing against this?
Yeah, so this is built off of the old school West Coast concept called Yankee. Other people call it cross country. Essentially, on one side, you send a post. On the other side, you send a deep over, and you're creating a layering effect. You're hoping the corner chases the post, and you can beat the over route to the other side. If for whatever reason they play quarters, and that corner can't hang with the post, then you throw it up. Well, like what's ended up happening is, because we have these condensed routes, people kind of understand, like they've kind of picked up the Yankee rules, right? Or the cross country rules. I think that's pretty easy. It's also, we're defending with 4 DBs, 2 routes. So we just got to figure out how we're going to do that. We can end up with 2 guys on it. Boom, we got to take care of. Well, offenses started saying, well, what if we added a lower over route? So we have the Dover deep over. We have a regular over route that's at about 10, and then we go ahead and bring the post. There's even been now some where they're not even running a post route, they're running a vertical with it. And so we're getting basically double post with a vertical to kind of really drain guys out. So that, so to me, this is something, it feeds into the under center. It feeds into the play action. One of the ways that these quarter teams are really being able to take care of this is the moment that they feel that climb route. So it's kind of, or a stair step route, that the safeties are just hinging and they're cross keying out of quarters, which is new. That's not something that I've been around quarters my entire life. Like, if there's one thing I know in football, it's quarters. I probably don't know anything else other than that, but that's the one thing I can say I'm probably an expert in, is quarters. But cross keying from that is not something you typically do unless you're playing like a flex bone team, where you would cross key, or if it's a double slot and you're trying to cross key because they're trying to move guys around. So do I need to come down? You typically don't do that. And you typically aren't going to do that to defend a route that's going down vertical. So the wave route has become really, really popular because it's good versus quarters and it's good versus cover 3. And some of the ways, like the Cardinals, the Eagles, are finding ways to defend it is kind of cross keying. So instead of working back out or working flat to that, I'm just going to tilt at a 45 and I'm getting my eyes to the slot on the other side. So if I'm on the single receiver side, I'm looking right now at the cross, because I know I'm probably getting two post routes, and I'm already let the lower cross go. And so to me, that's been the way that people have been able to defend it. And I think it's also a way of playing against more and more teams that are not running pure quarters. They're running a cover 2 side on one side, quarters on the other, or vice versa. And so they're trying to mess with the layering effect. And so they're trying to grab guys, and they're just telling that quarterback, just figure out who doesn't get grabbed. And then we're play action. By the time that we're all stacked on top of each other, find where the access is, and then just throw the ball. Makes it a lot easier for that quarterback to read it.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I mean, just because it sounds like a lot of running and it doesn't sound fun to me, but it's just like, you got a lot of dudes in front of you and they're all going different ways. That just is hard even if you understand where you're supposed to be, it's just like, there's a lot of people in front of me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, at least from the safety standpoint, but I'm an offensive lineman. I don't do that much running. I probably couldn't think and run that fast.
Yeah, I think that it's going to come to the lower levels. A lot of guys I hear all the time at the high school level are like, well, I don't necessarily see how that is going to, I'm just telling you can find ideas anywhere, things like that. If I'm an offense coordinator and I live in a 3-high district or conference, and I get a lot of 3-high, I'm going condensed and I'm running wave. It's easy, and I'm just going to bleed you out. I'm going to figure out where the space is. I'm just going to do it, because that's been one of the trends against 3-high. What do? Getting condensed sets, crack them, make the corner tackle, which is the old Alex Gibbs saying of like there's bad tacklers in the NFL, there's bad tacklers at the high school level. At corners don't want to tackle. So when you find one, you're cooking. And so to me, I think that it's just one of those evolutions of get ready for it. I wanted to make sure that we at least had one topic that wasn't defensive focused, that was, hey, get ready, it's coming. And the wave, I've talked to several NFL coaches, and the one thing they're like, I've seen more wave and I've heard about the wave more than anything else. That's the one thing that I'm worried about, is because we're getting the deep crisscross action, and we really have to be prepared for it. And I think one of the unique ways to do that is to cross key your safeties from a too high shell.
Well, yeah, they're not worried about the fans doing the wave. They're like, all right, on the football field, guys.
Different way.
Focus.
Different wave. Thanks again for joining Felix and I on Let's Talk Ball. We're ending our month of trends. So if you're just catching up, go back. We've got 3 other episodes. This will be episode 4 on trends. We've covered the NFL. We've covered the college level, offense and defensive side. We've got everybody. We've got experts in here that know what they're talking about. So again, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Stay up to date with MatchQuarters and the Let's Talk Ball podcast by subscribing at MatchQuarters.com. You can follow me on X at _coach_A, and on Blue Sky, IG, TikTok, and YouTube at MatchQuarters. And make sure to follow Felix on IG and X at Felix R. Johnson. Don't forget the R, and let's keep talking ball.